Thanks, Levi. So yeah, I just want to give a bit of background about the HASS and Indigenous RDC to just frame the conversation and the work that we're going to do together on a framework for Indigenous data governance. And apologies, because some of you will have heard all of this before, so just tune out. Yay, that worked. Okay. So, so what do we mean when we talk about a research data commons? So the definition that the ARDC uses is here. So a research data commons brings together people, skills, data, and related resources such as storage, compute, software, and models to enable researchers to conduct world-class data-intensive research. And for me, the people are the most important element of the research data commons. Without the people, then we may as well pack up and go home. So we actually need those communities to back what we're doing. I'm really bad at driving this. There we go. Okay. So at the Australian Research Data Commons, we have 3 research data commons. They are the People Research Data Commons, which is confusingly, for me anyway, health and medical research. Planet RDC is Earth and Environmental Sciences, and then we've got the Humanities, Arts, Social Sciences and Indigenous Research Data Commons. Okay, so the HASS and Indigenous Research Data Commons came into being in 2020 when the Department of Education identified 4 what they considered to be investment-ready projects in the Research Infrastructure Investment Plan. So there were 4 designated projects that had identified leads, and they were the Improving Indigenous Research Capabilities Project, the Language Data Commons of Australia, a project in social sciences called Integrated Research Infrastructure for Social Sciences. Thanks, Wojtek, mental blank. And a Trove Researcher platform, which was working with the National Library. That ended up being 2 separate but connected projects. The ARDC Community Data Lab, which is ongoing, and we had another project called the Trove Enhancements Project, which is now completed, which was led by the National Library. Okay. So obviously improving Indigenous research capabilities. As I said yesterday, it was mysterious to me that the Indigenous project got bundled in with HASS because Indigenous data is in everything, that, you know, including health and medical, including earth and environmental sciences. But, you know, I've been very happy to work on the Improving Indigenous Research Capabilities project with Marcia and her team. We have the Language Data Commons, which is led by Professor Michael Hoare at UQ, and there are a number of people here from the Language Data Commons, including Simon Musgrave, Petey Sefton, and Robert McClellan. Social Sciences, as I said, the Integrated Research Infrastructure for Social Sciences project, which has now come to an end, and we're now working on a pilot with Wojtek Tomaszewski on entrenched disadvantaged data. ARDC Community Data Lab, or CDL as we call it, is what we describe as an integrations project within the HASS and Indigenous RDC that is advantageous to a broad range of researchers, not just those directly aligned with the bigger projects. And finally, thanks to recent NCRIS investment, we're bringing in 2 new activities, one for the creative arts called Australian Cult Creative Histories and Futures, and Carolyn Wake is here, who is one of the leads on that. And one in what we've been calling mediated data, but which is about to be renamed as the Australian Internet Observatory, and we've got Amanda Lawrence who's representing that project here. Okay, so before I go on, I'm going to point out what most of you here are already aware of, that every single one of these activities has got a relationship with Indigenous data. So improving Indigenous research capabilities is fairly self-explanatory, but this project has guided our thinking on Indigenous matters since the beginning of the HASS and RDC back in 2021. Community Data Lab exposes data from Trove, which holds newspaper records from colonisation onward, and of course they all contain many accounts of frontier violence and so on. The Language Data Commons is working on Indigenous language material. Our social sciences project is working on entrenched disadvantage. And as we know, Indigenous people in Australia suffer grossly disproportionate rates of disadvantage against all measures of socio-economic status. Creative arts, Indigenous Australians have got the oldest unbroken tradition of creative arts in the world. And of course, mediated data, Indigenous Australians' use of social media has been reported as being higher than average, depending on locality, than non-Indigenous populations. Okay, right. So underpinning all of the projects at the ARDC are fair data principles. We've already talked about this at length this morning. So these were first published in 2016 and relate to making digital assets findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. However, we also recognise that translating the FAIR principles into practice will vary for each discipline, and nowhere is this more important than when considering Indigenous knowledge and data governance. So in the context of the rise of the FAIR principles, the CARE principles were developed by GIDA, the Global Indigenous Data Alliance. And while in the context of FAIR, it's suggested that data be as open as possible, but as closed as necessary, the CARE principles extend beyond this, considering collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics. So this has been useful for raising awareness in data infrastructure building communities as a starting point, but it is really just a starting point. So in building the HASS and Indigenous Research Data Commons, we want to strive to better reflect Indigenous people's rights and interests. And this in turn will also help to inform our People and Planet Research Data Commons to better address Indigenous people's rights and interests. But to get really serious about applying care to being fair, we're now ready to move to the adoption of a framework for governance of Indigenous data across the HASS and IRDC portfolio. And as such, we want to socialise a draft set of guidelines with you here today, as well as a draft ICIP policy. Have we got that? Printing. And I'd really like to acknowledge the assistance of Robert McClellan in looking at the draft, as well as Levi Murray. And I think it's over to you now, Levi.